These programs enhance my compassion, empathy, teamwork, and my understanding of what was taught in class. Service learning has helped me contemplate my learning as a student in ways that can be of use to the society. It has paved ways for me to explore, research, and know about issues that are prevailing with the people from our community, and to take up initiatives or like how to take up initiatives to fix them.
Service learning is the foundation in building a better learning community and experience. Electronic service learning has proven to me that social connections and helping one another is borderless. Students like me do not only learn from the books or presentations alone, but also we apply these learnings in addressing our social problems.
Gracias por seguir acompañándonos en este primer día del segundo
Staying with us
Simposio
in
Global.
our first day of the second Global Symposium of Uniservitate. Now we're going to have a panel titled An Ecumenical, Interreligious, and Humanistic Vision of Spirituality, of Fraternity and Service. In this panel, we are going to have José Ivo Folman from the University of Vale do Rio dos Sinos, Brazil, Mercy Pushpalatha from the United Board for Christian Higher Education in Asia, India, Xus Martín Garcia from the University of Barcelona, Spain, and James Kilsmeyer from the National Youth Leadership Council from the USA. The first participation will be by José Ivo Folman. He's a Jesuit priest. He has a Master of Social Sciences from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. He has also a Master of Social Science from the Pontifical Catholic University of Sao Paulo, Brazil. And he has a PhD in sociology from the Catholic University of Louvain in Belgium. He's also a professor at the graduate program on social sciences from the University of Vale do Rio dos Sinos in Brazil. And he's the director of the National Observatory of Socio-Environmental Justice, Luciano Mendes de Almeida, OLMA. He's also the principal investigator of the research group on transdisciplinarity, integral ecology, and socio-environmental justice. Other themes of research are sociology of religions, identities, transdisciplinarity, and ethnic racial relations. So, José Ivo, you have 15 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Estou muito feliz em poder.
Very happy to be able to participate in this panel that has so many different participations from different areas, attendees from different parts of the world. Allow me to begin by saying that at this almost end of the year 2021, we can say that we are still not free from the pandemic, which has been a scourge ever since the beginning of 2020. Although we do have signs that COVID-19 is being controlled. During the pandemic, many ideas were repeated. And I remember three such ideas. The first one, it was said the pandemic came to definitely and once and for all inaugurate what has been called for a long time now a epoch epochal change, a change in epoch. Second, the pandemic. With the pandemic, the certainties that marked the 20th century were destroyed, and we now truly begin the 21st century. Third, the pandemic has raised the awareness of mankind to seek its soul expressed in many and various traditions of wisdom and religious traditions. Indeed, the pandemic has been a very strong force for change. It has really turned our logic upside down. It has questioned the basic structures and the certainties that we upheld, or that upheld us. It has shaken humanity to the core. And in the wake of all this, social inequality have greatly increased across the world. I live in a country which is a champion in social inequality. But the pandemic has also reawakened across the world the search and the capacity to listen to the various voices that have been present throughout history. They've always been there, but mankind has become deaf to them, unfortunately. I truly believe in this major shift and this positive change that was made more explicit during the pandemic, but which has been woven for a longer period of time. We have to be attentive to all this positive mobilization. Certainly, one of the major leaderships of this new weaving is Pope Francis. He draws on other religious leaderships. It's quite meaningful that Pope Francis, who is imbued with deep spirituality of Ignatian origin, at the same time that he inspired himself in Franciscan
Recording in
spirituality.
progress.
The saint of Assisi, in Fratelli Tutti, he has also resorted to other leaders from other fields of religious tradition, like the patriarch Bartolomeo. He was one of his main interlocutors in drafting Laudato Si, and Uliman, Ahmad Al-Tayed were the clear expression in drafting Fratelli Tutti, with the joint belief that God created all human beings equal in rights and duties and in dignity. They were called upon to live among themselves as brothers and sisters. According to Pope Francis, a true ecological approach becomes a true social approach that must integrate justice in the debates on the environment, to hear the clamor of the earth and the clamor of the poor. In this sense, integral ecology includes the convergent task of combating poverty, devolving dignity to the excluded, and taking care of nature. In presenting the encyclical letter Fratelli Tutti in 2020 in the St. Peter Square, Pope Francis said, human fraternity and caring for creation are the only way for the full development and peace. It's important to take note that Pope Francis does not speak about two ways, but a single way. It's the way that makes a deep connection with caring of our common house and international friendship under the umbrella of the paradigm of integrated and integral ecology. It is from this viewpoint that we stand in promoting justice in our province of Jesuits. I'm speaking about Brazil, drafting and cultivating a three-pronged care as an invitation to the culture of care, of caring, looking specifically to three major carings: the care of human dignity in the attention we give to ourselves and to others, caring about the gifts of creation in their diversity, that is cultivating health and life of ecosystems, and caring about the social and socioeconomic planning and public policies in order to decrease social inequality. When we think in practical terms about our commitment as regards justice in the effort of having a word to say on this and bearing in mind the environmental and social issues at hand, within this framework, some operational shortcuts are being tried out. And there are three specific levels or three strategic positions in our practical work in promoting justice or social environmental justice. In other words, we can act in justice in the promotion of knowledge, and having a direct relationship or dialogue with groups, organizations, and movements that as regards decision making, and thirdly, in our daily practice, in our day-to-day experience of living and acting and being. These above mentioned cares, according to the three dimensions or vectors which we establish, have an operational force when they are visualized from these three positions. These are three strategic positions, across the board positions. In view of this, which is submitted here in a simplified fashion, this can be looked at as a healthy way of seeking sustainable development, of an integrated education, and especially of the spirituality of caring as seen from a multiplicity of religious sources. Taking up this new conscience because of the shock that the pandemic has meant means that we can have yet another superficial and inconsequential movement unless humankind is not able to use its expertise, its know-how to, within each cultural context, make peace with its past. This making peace with one's past requires an in-depth transformation in education, and also within what we call spirituality or the soul of humanity. Humanity urgently needs to center itself on the culture of caring and do away with the tragedy of the culture of indifference. Attention must be placed on the dimension of relation and the interconnection of everything in interpersonal relations in society and as regards the gifts of nature. We need to be carefully attentive to justice and its practice in the complex social environment. This careful attention is what, to finish, we can call spirituality of caring. This denomination seems to be more appropriate because it has at its focus the permanent care of human dignity and life in all its manifestations. We need a spirituality that will radically change our practices, that will bring us back to the path of justice, that will be a force for regeneration of human wisdom. Spirituality that we are requested to have today is to make our hearts available to seek the best way forward to build sustainable societies that will generate life. The new learning formats seen especially in service learning, and also the spaces for the exercise of democracy and acknowledgement and dialogue are the expression and the path for this new spirituality. If I said initially that we should be attentive to this entire positive mobilization, looking at important leaderships and movements and theoretical advances and conceptual advances, we should also remember that we should multiply our attention as regards the multiple initiatives and projects that happen and that fill us with hope. Personally, I took some examples from social projects that were developed in Jesuit universities, and I will briefly mention one. The title is called Group of Citizenship and Afro Religion, created in the campus of the Jesuit University in the south of Brazil by the Afro-American nucleus of that university. They hold weekly meetings with the African descendants, between the Afro descendants and the municipality, bringing together children, young people, adults, elderly, and the elderly for a cultural dialogue of collective learning and knowledge, and bringing closer these people with the world of academia. When we seek to identify points that have to do with spirituality in social projects, generally, new horizons are opened up of perception that are quite interesting. As we see specifically in this group of citizenship and Afro-American religiousness, which was originated from the will shown by leaders of different confessions to better know the culture and the history of African descendants in Brazil. Their spirituality in this project reflects, since the origin, the opening up and cultivation of different spiritual practices side by side to reflections of Ignatian spirituality, which have always been marking. We always begin, says the coordination of the group, we always begin the activities with some kind of reflection, be it from the Catholic spirituality or from some other religious confession. The spirituality in this project has always expressed itself in rights of active equality, the right to dignity and fraternity, in mutual trust and knowledge, in justice and peace between all people and religions. According to its coordination, and I'm quoting again, The respect of religious diversity therefore guides the search for the grounds of peaceful coexistence between the multiple forms that lead to the higher being, the highest being, and overcoming limitations and behaviors which separate mankind. Another comment is as follows from the same group. Life without stigmas, without masks, without judgments, leads one to enhancing diversity and having a religious complementarity and social equality. As happens with this project, in other projects, we can hear practices of we can hear reports of various practices that lead to creative new ways forward to achieve the same spirituality that comes out of social and environmental justice from a horizon. And I apologize, says the speaker. You must respect the voice of an old man. Of a horizon of common pedagogical practices. This spirituality is marked by the mystical nature that is awakened and cultivated, the radical acknowledgement of dignity of oneself and the dignity of the other, in caring for life and the gifts of creation, driven by love for all life, which exists in the present and in the future of our planet, in suffering in view of the inhuman situation that many brothers and sisters live. This spirituality is nourished by various factors of rich treasures of the human soul that have been cultivated since the beginning of time, and which are expressed in different and occult ways, and we have to be attentive to what is happening around us. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Nuestra segunda intervención estará a cargo de Merci Puspalaza. Merci es máster en ciencia y máster en investigación en química por la Universidad de Madurai Kamaraj y se doctoró en la Universidad de Alagappa de Karaikudi, India. Desde 2018 trabaja.
Since 2018, she has been working as a consultant in Southern Asia. She's also a reviewer in the National Assessment and Accreditation Council of the Lead Like Jesus Society in India. And she's also a director of the Lady Doe College Foundation in the United States. She's a candidate from the QAC, the Canadian University Application Center. As a director and secretary of the Lady Doe College in Madurai, India, she has activated the initiative Frontier Engagement in the study plan for third year on research, action, and experiential learning. She was also a member of the School of Chemistry of the Lady Doe College for more than 3 decades. Merci, you have 15 minutes for your presentation.
Friends, I am happy to be with you in this panel. and I bring greetings to you from my organization, United Board for Higher Education in Asia. It's an Asian higher education network which works among colleges and universities in promoting whole person education. Let me take a few minutes to share my slides with you. So I'm here today to share my thoughts on how service learning could be used as a means to promote spirituality in colleges and universities. Since I have been a teacher for more than 3 decades, and I have been a practitioner of service learning in the college where I worked. So from my experience and from my exposure, I wish to share my thoughts on spirituality and service learning. And my content goes like this. I want to say why spirituality matters in today's 21st century. And why do we say it's a need in the workplace? And how universities and colleges can develop spirituality then, if that is a need in the work front. Since I come from Asia, where we have different religions being in operation, I want to bring forth what is the perception of spirituality according to the various religions existing in Asia. Because in our colleges and universities, we get students from all these religions. So how to promote spirituality amongst them when they come from different religions? And then I want to make a mention of it, spirituality as a competence, and how universities can offer academic programs and curriculum to attain this competence. And finally, I want to touch upon 2 service learning courses from 2 different network institutions in Asia and how they can be used to promote spirituality. And as you see here on the screen, today in 21st century, it's a challenge for the employers to have an effective employee engagement because there's a quick turnover. Retention of employers becomes a challenge. And the LinkedIn reports, as it's mentioned here, 2018 report says, 93% of employees stay at a job longer only if there is an investment in the career. Otherwise, they don't stay back. They keep moving. And 2015 LinkedIn study says 59% of US hiring managers seem to say that it's very challenging to find candidates with soft skills. Therefore, universities and colleges, we need to really prepare our graduates who are truly acceptable with the required competence in the workplaces too. And I recently came across a paper by Maria Joyce and Sandra Sapra, who said the set of transversal competencies are the ones which are required, which prepare the students for future work. And they say these set of competencies are different from the technical competency or the special competency, which is directly connected to their academics. And they say it's nothing but leadership, communication, problem solving, teamwork, creativity, and so on. And in a recently issue of University World News by Scheller, I also read an article on a crucial skill that is required today is adaptability, especially in this context of pandemic, which is really shaking the whole globe. The graduates who leave the portals of the institution, universities, need to have the skill of adaptability where they are willing to change and where they are willing to become flexible. So what do we in universities we need to do? The Latin word for universities is universitas, which means whole. And therefore, universities need to develop holistically developed people. Otherwise, the graduates are prepared for not only job or livelihood, they are also prepared for life. So they are able to face the challenges that they face between the life and the career, and they are able to pursue a successful life. Because today we see there are lots of successful career men and women. Ultimately, after a few years, they become failures in life. That's because they are not able to cope with the challenges. And that is where universities need to develop this holistically developed students. And the organization wherein I work now, United Board, we have a definition for whole person education like this. This is our mission. It is nothing but developing the students intellectually, ethically, and spiritually. Today, most of the institutions concentrate on cognitive development, intellectual development. But we believe today the graduates need to be holistically developed, and therefore the institutions need to offer whole person education. So in this context, I want to touch upon the existing religions, major religions of Asia. What do we perceive spirituality as? Spirituality in Buddhism. The main aim of Buddhist education is students need to be given again holistic development. Serving the society becomes the central concept of Buddhist education. So all religions talk about serving the community, serving the less privileged, serving the socially deprived community. And Trio mentions, if educational institutions offer education with these objectives, that is, students who can serve the community with the holistic development, then there will not be any social problems, complexity, and corruption in this world. And what does Islam say? Hussein talks about the definition of Islam like this, where relationship with Allah that affects the individual's self-worth, self-meaning, and connectedness with others. So he means spirituality is realizing your worth, self-dignity, the importance of you, and then connecting with the others too. And spirituality is also defined as it's being perceived having special cognitions, behaviors with oneself, God, and others. So I'm able to connect myself with God, Supreme Being. I'm able to connect myself with myself, and I'm able to connect myself with the others. That's what Islamic spirituality is. And spirituality and Hinduism, Srivatsava say and Barmola, they say rituals are related to spirituality. Why they say rituals are related to spirituality? Because rituals help individuals to adjust their ego. So when the ego is adjusted, a change, they become people who can truly serve the community, and they can live a healthy life with the right mental health, mental wellness, and human health too. And they also say there are 4 paths. This is what Hinduism says. 4 paths to moksha or heaven: karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, raja yoga. And the first 2 yogas I've highlighted here. Karma yoga means performing one's duty selflessly, against service. And bhakti yoga says loving God through devotion and service. So what I wish to highlight this at this moment is all religions talk about spirituality is to do with serving the community. So Christian spirituality, what does it say? No exclusive private self, because every human being is created in the image of God. So there is a relationship between the human being and the creator God. And therefore, this human being, when he raises a question, who am I? Whose am I? The human being is able to understand his worth or dignity, the importance of the human life. And human existence is more of a relational work. One cannot be an isolated being. One has to be a related being. And also spirituality, Christian spirituality says it's to serve and not to be served. And that's what the Lord Jesus showed when he lived on this earth. And contemplating God's compassion for humanity, showing genuine compassion, creating deeper transformative structures, or showing empathy, all these God's attributes, when man relates with this divine power, God himself, man is able to show all these attributes in his life also. That's what Christian spirituality says. And this is a very profound statement that I'm always attracted to, because it talks about there could be a possibility your faith and your faith life can be forfeited. When it can happen? When your service projects do not reflect on your experience of your belief. So is my Christian belief serve the society, not to be served, but to serve? If that is not reflected, then my faith and faith life are forfeited. So that is what Christian spirituality is. So we come to a conclusion, all religions talk about spirituality as knowing yourself, self-awareness, and why am I existing in this world, the purpose of me, or the meaning of my life in this earth, then seeking connection to the divine power and relating with the divine power. And as an outcome of that relationship, you are getting connected with the rest of the human beings in the world, and you develop a desire to serve others. This is the crux of the spirituality which all religions talk about. And therefore, how do we as universities and colleges, we are going to develop this spirituality? There is no other way by which we can do it, only by offering whole person education through experiential learning. And we know experiential learning, for which the best pedagogy is service learning. There are lots of experiential learnings possible, but service learning is an outstanding proven pedagogy through which spirituality can be developed. And how can we develop? The teachers need to take the students through a reflective exercise. Thereby the student reflects on the meaning and purpose of his or her life. And the student tries to understand, who am I? Whose am I? The student tries to understand why I'm in this world. What is the purpose? So how am I supposed to be connected with the rest of the society in which I live? And that develops spirituality as a competence in the students. And I want to mention what is competence. This is what US Department of Education says. It's a combination of skills, abilities, and knowledge needed to perform a particular task. Quite often in the college curriculum, we talk about knowledge, skill, and attitude. Unless all the three come together as a cluster, and if it is taken to a real life situation, knowledge, skill, and attitude is a waste. And therefore, that aspect is, that dimension is what I call a spirituality. And this is how I wish to explain this. Knowledge, skills, and attitude, all of them taken together in real life situation, and that is competency. And spirituality is nothing but a competency. And now I wish to quote two institutions in our network, one in Indonesia. It's called Petra Christian University. They received the grant from United Board, and they had a service learning program. What is that service learning program? This is for the students of architecture and interior designing. And the students had a service learning activity in designing a library with an inclusive approach, because the students had a course, sociology course on inclusive design. So the academic curriculum was integrated with the community engagement. So what did they do in the community engagement? They interacted with the community of people with disabilities, physical disabilities, pregnant women, senior lecturers, and children of faculty members. When they interacted with them, they were able to identify what is the need in them and how they are supposed to design the library so that the access becomes easy to the library, and the access becomes easy to the learning resources available in the library. So they truly develop that connectedness with the community, or they truly develop that compassion and empathy with the community. So they become truly people who enhance their competency on spirituality. So this is how service learning helps the students to develop spirituality as competence. So how do they develop? After their visit to the community or during the process of their community engagement, teachers make them reflect on their experiences, raising some structured, reflective questions. So those questions help them to realize all these spiritual dimensions: self-awareness, the purpose and mission of their life, the connectedness with the Supreme Being God, the connectedness with the fellow human beings, and how I need to serve, showing empathy and compassion with them. All these are developed in the students during these courses. This is another university, University of Foreign Languages in Vietnam. This is a program, service learning program, that was taken up by the students who are trained to become English teachers. And so what is the kind of the program they did? the students were grouped into small groups, wherein each group went to a different community. One group went to shop sellers, street vendors, orphans in pagodas. Another group went to meet the staff in the tourist center. Another group went to meet the disabled children at Hope Center. It's a center called Hope, where they housed disabled children, physically disabled children. And another group went and interacted with the workers in cruise boats, because that's a picnic center wherein lots of internationals used to come in to have the crew, to take the cruise boats. And therefore, these students interacted with these community groups. After interaction, they were able to redesign their syllabus for English teaching and the lesson plan, and prepared suitable teaching materials and compiled bilingual phrase book for respective community. Like workers in cruise boats, they may not be able to have that phrase book that was used by the shop sellers. And similarly, the shop sellers phrase book cannot be used by the disabled children in Hope Center. So they were able to really understand the needs in the community. They were able to truly get connected with the community. They were able to develop the compassion and identify the requirement of the community. Accordingly, they prepared the lessons and the learning materials. So this is what I call it as their knowledge, skill, and attitude. All of them are put together for real life situation. And thereby they are able to develop problem solving skill, creativity skill, and they are able to become good team members. They are able to become good communicators. And thereby we say service learning is one of the best pedagogies which enable the students to develop spirituality. So finally, I conclude, realizing the meaning and purpose of life. As I mentioned in the previous two cases, when the students interacted with the community, they were able to realize the purpose of their lives, why they are created in this earth. And they also realize that they need to seek the connection with a higher power, God himself. And then they get connected themselves with the disadvantaged people, and they develop compassion and empathy to serve them. And ultimately, it leads them to a lifestyle where they become co-learners with the community. They learn with the community and not from the community. There is no hierarchy. The students are on a higher level, community is on a lower level. So they take the community partners, community people as partners in their learning. This is exactly spirituality helps them to develop that kind of a perception in their lives. So I strongly believe service learning is a means by which colleges and universities can offer whole person education to the students. In turn, it can develop this competence of spirituality, which is very much required for today's job market as well as for the general life itself. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, merci. La tercera aportación está a cargo de Chus Martín.
Merci. The third presentation will be by Chus Martín. She's a professor of the School of Education of the Barcelona University. She is a member of the
Recording
and she's a
stopped.
coordinator of the Masters in Education. She focuses on values, service learnings, and the youth in the risk of exclusion. Including her publications, I can highlight Projects with Souls, Project Work with Community Service by Grau in 2016, Educarse for Brave People, Service Learning with Teenagers in Risk of Exclusion, Octaedro 2018, and a Pedagogy in Favor of Inclusion, published on the Social Education Journal 2020. Chus, you have the floor. It's 15 minutes assigned to you to develop your presentation. Thank you so much, Yolanda. I'm delighted to take part in this panel and share this space with my colleagues. I will be sharing my PowerPoint. I would like to contribute to show the link or the presence of the value of fraternity in the methodology of service learning. I will get started by remembering some of what my colleagues have already said, how important fraternal relation and mutual help has in current lives. This has been made evidence in the current pandemic. We, unfortunately, are still immersed. This pandemic has made us become aware of how frail, how vulnerable, and how dependent human beings are. During this year and a half, we discovered the existence of our own limits, and we also have discovered how those who help us are, when they help us improve on them, who easing up on suffering where we don't have material resources and physical necessary resources. Based on these networks of mutual help, they were spontaneously created during the most difficult months. We made sure, or we checked, that there's no possible way out from the crisis if we cannot create fraternal relations that of help with human beings. But we also saw that the others who help are ourselves. We are part of a network of relations, those who give and those who take, and this becomes consistent as acts multiply. We are at the same time subjects of needs, and we can also help others. Let's give one extra step, and let's now find two situations where the value of fraternity is very evident. Two quotes that you know quite well. The first one, Article number 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It says, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and in rights, bestowed as they are of reason and conscience. They have to behave fraternally with one another. As you see, this introduces fraternal behavior as a duty in relations. The expression ones with the others includes the number of men and women who, not being related to one another by family ties, we share, though, our human condition. Even though this is clear, the understanding of having a fraternal behavior is like, I would like to focus on the consequence stemming from this, respecting the right of others to be treated as siblings. So this begins as a duty, but it almost automatically becomes a right, the right to fraternity, the right of every person, no matter their origin, their sexual orientation, their rights, or their creeds, to be respected and treated as an equal. This is how the right and the duty demand and protect all inhabitants on the face of Earth in the same way without distinction. The second quote is also one you know very well, comes from the Fratelli Tutti encyclical that our colleague has already commented. This is completely focused to fraternity, a value that appears on the first reflection by Pope Francis. Fratelli Tutti, San Francis of Assisi wrote to talk to all the brothers and sisters to suggest a lifestyle that is ruled by the Evangelium. This piece of advice invites me into highlighting one, inviting to live a love that goes beyond geographic and spatial barriers. Those who love the others are happy, both when they are far or next to them. With these very simple remarks, he expressed the essential component of an open fraternity that allows us to recognize, value, and love every person beyond physical proximity, beyond the place in the universe where they may have born or where they live. As you know, this encyclical has a very strong social character. It's an invitation to exercise fraternity, and in the broad sense, it goes well beyond daily relations. It also includes institutions, social lives, policy and government systems. Based on these two references that I consider are wonderful, we will see what the relation is between fraternity and education, and why is it that we say that service learning activates the value of fraternity. Where are we based? There is a fact that should put us into thinking. Fraternity is not a departing point. We would like for it to be, but it actually is a challenge or an achievement that requires a little bit more than good intentions. We at least need solidarity-based economic policies, social organizations that are based on justice, changes in lifestyle that damage the relation with human beings and the environment, and of course, educational proposals that have all this as a background. We, as a matter of fact, believe that service learning is a proposal and a pedagogical methodology that activates the practice of this value. I will just give an example that can help us as reference when I'll be introducing the next few comments. My previous colleague has also talked about the students of architecture, so I should say this is a powerful place to carry out service learning. The case I'll be presenting, this is an activity that is actually carried out by the students. As you know, housing issues are a reality. They are more intensely so in the outskirts of city rather than in cities that are more affluent. In general, houses on the outskirts I apologize, but the PowerPoint seems to be playing with me. Frequently so, the houses of those who live where there's more poverty do not meet the necessary sanitary conditions to keep the proper well-being. Given such a reality, some schools of architecture have generated projects focused on putting together drawings, analysis, reports, and a number of documents where solutions are offered as specifically to these problems. So you may realize what the situation, the relation is of university students and the families in the neighborhoods. That is essential to have the right proposals and a prior right diagnosis. Let's leave aside the example with our architecture colleagues and let's go back to fraternity. As you know, the value-based concepts do not stand in isolation. On the contrary, they are so much interconnected that sometimes we talk about families or value chains in order to talk about similar values, the meanings of which evoke that of others. So when we talk about fraternity in connection to relations, value concepts close to these are friendship, solidarity, or care. We sometimes refer to this as synonymous. Nonetheless, in order to evoke a more political sense, then we would rather talk about justice or commitment. We will choose the term emancipating fraternity, a term used by a number of different authors. And I think that it picks on the different dimensions of this term, given the fact that our reflection focuses on the relation with service learning. I will be highlighting 4 aspects that I believe are directly related to one another. The first one, that of relations based on equality. We've seen that the Declaration of Human Rights begins with a statement: all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and in rights. And this statement has started in order to end up asking for a fraternal behavior among human beings. Fraternity, as a matter of fact, is very little related to the asymmetry and power relations. Brothers and sisters treat one another as equal. differences do not warrant a person being more than anyone else or having more rights or more duties. In fraternal behavior, elements that condition social relations, such as prestige or purchasing power, those elements fade away. As a result of this, fraternal relations cannot ignore inequality in dignity and in rights, or the subjection of a person or a group of persons by others. Let's focus on the second aspect that I wanted to underscore. This is the feeling of care for others. The feeling to care about the others. You know, the popular phrase, loving one another as brothers and sisters, talks about how these relations are characterized, bearing consequences on behavior. In this sense, fraternity is related to the creation of bonds that go beyond reason, duty, or obligation. As a matter of fact, caring for another predisposes to a cordial kind of relation. It places us in front of a behavior that it's not just respectful, but it also is involved in the well-being of others. Fraternal relations are full of feelings of worth, self-worth, the worth of others, understanding, and affection. It is not indifferent to pain or when the person doesn't achieve what they long for. The relation between brothers and sisters are not detached from pain. They recognize the others as someone they care for. I would say that in service learning, it is the recognition of a problem or a need, frequently the suffering from the other, that moves us into action.
The third element I wanted to emphasize, and I don't want to speak much more because I know you must be tired, is the civic friendship among those that are unknown. This word unknown sounds a little strong, but it's true that the concept of civic friendship has been used to refer to that fraternal relationship with those we don't know, we don't share our lives with, or any other personal values. Perhaps these voluntary obligations that we accept among friends is a good reference of this relationship that would be desirable among those that are not. And beyond the legitimate individual projects that we all have and the spontaneous invitations and based on affinity, human beings do share something. We share citizenship and fate, almost nothing. None of the big challenges, the health-related, environmental, social, economic, none of those big challenges that humanity is facing will be overcome without strong cooperation systems. Let me remind you the theories of giving and the anti-utilitarian concepts. The research evidence that individuals do not move only based on interest, but also out of the desire to cooperate. Human beings in our DNA and this fraternal and altruistic behavior, and also from psychology, they insist on cooperation and they concern for the well-being of others, and this inclination to altruism as a human feature. And now, finally, I don't know what's happening with the slides. They're moving on their own. And the final characteristic I wanted to mention is this of the ideals of justice, or fraternal justice, the historical reference whose meaning of the term fraternity, perhaps it's closer to the idea of justice that has a marked political dimension, is the French Revolution. Under the theme freedom, equality, fraternity, these values are defined as rights that do not depend on personal feelings or affection or friendship. Fraternity, therefore, does not depend on the attitude of the one that behaves with fraternity, but on the right of that should be treated as a brother, the inalienable right of a person to be free, not to suffer any kind of dominance, and not to be out of unfair systems that generate exclusion and first and second class citizenship. The more revolutionary dimension of the term fraternity, this social criticism is intensified. This will to modify attitudes that prevent the realization of rights and self-realization. It's also included in the Tutti Fratelli encyclical letter, based on a fraternity that should lead to social policies that ensure the common good and the dignity of every individual. And I'm sure we are all thinking that the criticism and social criticism is also present in many service learning projects. And as a conclusion, and related to these four elements I mentioned, let me just remind you that far from paternalistic attitudes, the methodology of service learning predisposes us to this reciprocity between the one that gives and the one that receives, horizontal relationships and the respect for everybody's dignity. And detecting needs helps raise this sensitivity and to also feel affected by the pain of the others. However, the element of service, the element of the action, is the one that ensures is giving to those unknown, favoring the creation of friendship, of civic friendship. Service learning also has social transformation in the horizon and the introduction of specific changes that improve the conditions. And that's it. I wish you intelligence, courage to design service learning projects that may contribute to creating an engaged citizenship with the conservation of the planet and a more fraternal world. Thank you. Thank you, Shus. And the final speaker is James Kilsmeyer. He's a PhD in education from the University of Colorado. He has a master's in international relations from the American University in Washington, a BS in zoology from Wheaton College. He's the founder and former CEO of the National Youth Leadership Council. He's co-author of 2 books, several books, and more than 30 articles. And he has lectured widely on youth and education issues. His recognitions include Honorary Doctor of Laws from Concordia University, the George Norlin Award for Lifetime Achievement from the University of Colorado, and the Kurt Hahn Award from the Association of Experiential Education. James, you have 15 minutes for your presentation.
Reconnect with all of you in Argentina and perhaps elsewhere in the world as a part of this enormous and very challenging and very important project that involves many of us around the world, having to do with how we can better integrate active learning with a giving dimension, what we call service learning, into the mainstream of public and private higher education, especially amongst universities who are participating out of a background in their Catholic and perhaps other faith traditions. I'll just go ahead then and acknowledge in particular the roots of what we're talking about, what I'll be talking about today. And I will have some slides that'll intersperse with my comments. First of all, I would like to extend special thanks to Father Louis Gendron of Fujian University in Taipei, Taiwan. Father Gendron invited me to come to Taiwan in the early 1900s, 1910 actually, not, I'm sorry, 2010. the production of some of this basic material and the undergirding of this presentation is from that time in 2010 in Taiwan, although very much updated and influenced by other factors. But I wanted to acknowledge Fuyan Catholic University in particular. I'll move right along and to talk about service learning from an ecumenical perspective, and as well as how it fits into the way we consider teaching and learning from a non-faith-based perspective, but with special emphasis on faith-based applications of service learning. I will be following the outline represented by these slides. Service learning has roots in many places. And particular, I'm going to focus on its roots in Christian tradition, but I would also like to acknowledge its roots in the public education sectors. And the writing and literature in this area of how service learning affects teaching and learning, and how it affects citizenship and school completion, and all those things that those of us who also work in public education are concerned with. But I will give special emphasis as we move along to service learning as it is influenced by and can influence how we operate from a faith perspective. And I will give special attention to the Christian faith, recognizing that I come from a Protestant background, and but will interject perhaps some thoughts that represent all people who follow a Christian faith perspective. The traditional transition to adult, and I will be giving emphasis to young people as they are making the transition to adulthood. And that's typically reflected by completing school, leaving home, becoming financially independent, marriage, or developing a relationship that leads to family, having a child. And then there is a possibility now along the way to include service learning within that normative set of activities that leads to full responsibility. The traditional way of thinking about young people moving to full responsibility is to consider them as people who, on the left side, the traditional view, are viewed as people who use resources as they grow older, and that's typically through schools. In service learning, we're flipping that understanding to look at young people as resources themselves, and as not just passive members of the learning community, but active members of the community. As not consumers of information, but producers of information, producers of service activity that has real value. Typically, we often look at young people as those who need help in making the transition to adulthood. Instead, in service learning, we see young people as those who give help or offer help. And oftentimes, as looking at the traditional view of teaching and learning, young people as recipients of our service, recipients of what we produce for them. In service learning, it flips the equation again to givers of service, and also flipping it again from victims necessarily, and sometimes as young people are put in very bad positions, to leaders themselves. another way of looking at service learning has to do with how we learn. And this learning pyramid suggests that the most effective way of learning starts at the bottom of the pyramid versus at the very top, even though a very large percentage of our learning is in a lecture and or reading approach. The next most common way of presenting information in a schooling context is audiovisual, like we're doing now. Better yet is some form of demonstration, and then involving others in an active way through discussions. Over 50% in this classic study believe that getting other people involved, especially not just by discussing the activity, the thought, but practicing by doing what we're talking about. And lastly, the way that seems to be most effective is when young people or students are involved in taking the information and delivering it to other people, teaching others. I want to move to, those ideas are the core ideas around service learning across the spectrum of organizations and institutions. So it's applicable in a public education setting as well as a faith-based setting. In a faith-based setting, there is a particular anchoring concept that I would like to walk through with regard to its relevance to service learning. And that has to do with the parable of the Good Samaritan. And that's found in the 10th chapter of Luke, 29 through 37. So Jesus was being grilled by lawyers, and Jesus said, well, let me give you a story about what I mean by becoming a neighbor. And then he went on, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers, stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, and leaving him half dead. And then, as we know in the text, a priest came down the road and he passed on the other side. And so did a Levite, who was a holy person in the synagogue. And then and he also passed on the other side. But a Samaritan who traveled came up to the man and saw him, and he took pity on him. Now, a little background on Samaritans during the time of Jesus. Samaritans were outcasts. They were people who were shunned by the Jewish people of their day, and were considered amongst to be on the lowest rung of the sociological ladder of the time. And in the case of the story that Jesus is telling now, the Samaritan went up to the wounded man, bandaged his wounds, poured on oil, and they took the man away and brought him to an inn to take care of him. And you all know this story, but it's good to be reminded. The next day, he took out some money and gave it to the innkeeper to look after him. And he said, when I return, I will reimburse you for the extra expense. And then the question was posed to Jesus, or posed by Jesus, and asking the people who were grilling now, the inquisitors who were surrounding him with ideas, wanting to know what the meaning of this story was. And this is where Jesus really breaks tradition when in responding to the question. And the expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Yes, Jesus said, go and do likewise. In essence, it was the person who came alongside the person along the road. And the road itself, and I've walked this road in Israel, Palestine, is a very dangerous place. So the terrain offers a lot of hiding places for bandits and people who would attack people along the way. So it's very vivid in this picture and very vivid in my mind. And so what would what would be the way of traveling on this road that would allow you to then be attacked? Well, it was fairly common at the time, and those who were the attackers were people who would do harm to the person. And so it was very unusual at the time. I'll just back up a minute. It was very unusual at the time for someone like a person who was outside the Jewish tradition, a Samaritan, a person from Samaria. In fact, Jesus had just come a few days before from a Samaritan village where he and his disciples were rejected. And so it is extraordinarily unusual and extraordinarily unusual at that time for someone who comes out of a Samaritan faith experience, which was kind of a fringe element at the time, to be the hero of the story. And so that was something that was very unusual. And so why would we look at the Samaritan as the exemplar of the story in the way that Jesus did? Because in essence, Jesus was saying that it isn't who you are and where you've come from, where you've studied, what your faith tradition is, but the new norm for greatness is that you will be a servant. And of course, we know this as coming from, in particular, among my heroes and the heroes of many people, from Martin Luther King, and the idea that in one of his sermons, just months before he was killed, brought forth the notion that everybody can be great because everybody can serve. And that's basically, in the colloquialism of our time, the message that Jesus was saying is that everybody can be great, because everybody can serve. Everybody has access to salvation. Everybody has access to the words and works of Jesus, not because of where they've been or what group they belong to, or what race they're a part of, or what gender, but because they have an ability to adopt the notion of servant, what we now call servant leadership. And so that as Jesus offered us a new norm of greatness, which is service. And this is an anchoring concept in service learning, because it says to all young people, all older people, that we each have the capacity to serve and to contribute. And so I would suggest that in our thinking about service learning, that we should consider this as one of the anchoring concepts, especially if we are looking at it from a faith perspective. Variations of this are not only found in Christian tradition, Catholic tradition, but it's found in all other faith traditions that I'm aware of. So the notion of being a servant and not being connected to a particular theology is what I'd like to give emphasis here. Thanks very much.
Muchas gracias a todos los ponentes por su
Thank you so much to all the speakers for your great contributions. And now, after listening to you, I would like to ask you a question. At Scholas, we want to have this image of the polyhedric image that Pope Francis presented in his latest encyclica, Fratelli Tutti. We are in an intercultural, interreligious world where differences prevail. But we should recognize these differences as a complement and as a wealth, because everything is more than the summation of the parts. This idea is key for an ecumenical vision where we recognize and perceive the beauty of the other from the encounter and the dialogue. At a Catholic university with a vision, mission, and values, and with a clear social function, but maintaining that diversity that is present in society, in our culture, among our students, what would be, in your opinion, the steps or the priority actions to humanize the caring for the other? To put it in other words, how can we act to move from seeing the other as a partner to seeing the other as the neighbor, as Pope Francis says in the encyclical letter. What should we change? How should we work on that? Okay, so I ask you this question, and whoever in the panel would like to start, you're welcome.
Adelante, merci.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mercy.
I have been working in a college where we have the student community from different religion. Majority will be from Hindu religion, and a small percentage of Christian students and a small percentage of Islam students. And but our college was a Christian college. But still we had students from different religious background. So intentionally, the college has been evolving a curriculum in such a way that the students, irrespective of their religious affiliation, everybody was treated alike, everybody was given equal opportunities, everybody was, everybody's voice was heard in different forum, and the kind of activities given and the kind of courses and the academic experience provided to the students, wherein we mix the students and we give activities. So no way we segregate the students of religions in any way. So ultimately what happens, we have a chapel inside the college campus, and irrespective of the religion, many students come to the chapel for worship, for prayer, for singing. So the kind of the culture and the environment that's created in the college, when everybody is treated alike and everyone feels the importance of them as individuals and persons, whatever the religious background is. So even when the faculty are newly recruited, faculty members are also given training and orientation on this particular important culture and ethos of the institution. I think that is how the this kind of an environment has been promoted at the institutional level.
Sí, bueno, yo aprender de mis compañeros que creo que están mucho mejor situados para contestar esta pregunta tan bonita que nos hace Yolanda.
Much better prepared to answer this beautiful question from Yolanda. How do we move from considering the other a partner to considering them a neighbor? But I think that there are some values without which we are not going to be able to do that. One is the ability to recognize the other. I think this is basic for life, I would say, but at least for higher education. And the importance of recognizing all stakeholders. Everybody has a role to play in this. But recognizing the other, sometimes it's different if we are not humble, if we do not know that we also make mistakes, that from our positions, we have to perhaps come down from that place where we think we have all the answers. And this is true not only for people with different beliefs, but also for people that believe the same, but anyway, we have different perspectives and points of view in many aspects. And that is not betraying any identity. That is just being able to be flexible, to adopt and embrace the other. So this invites dialogue, how we are going to recognize and embrace the other if we cannot establish a dialogue with the others. So I think that when these things happen, we discover something important, and that brings us closer than rather moves us apart, that we share much more than what we think. I think it's an experience that we've all had at some point. Even when we do service learning, we've had to cooperate with somebody that perhaps we were not clear about. We thought it was going to be very difficult. We were perhaps prejudiced. But then when we are face to face and when we work together, we all look alike. We all have that human approach. And I think that's one of the gifts that service learning has given us teachers, and also to our students, and to those that cooperate with us every day. Can I say something?
I've been pondering, prompted by your question, and I believe that perhaps the best way to start answering thereto is an invitation to an attempt to focus on the core value, on dignity. I believe that humanity at large is now living through a time in history where the soul of humanity, the dignity,
talvez caminho que se
perhaps a path that might be pointed out is a path of dialogue, particularly interreligious dialogue, a dialogue between different religious traditions, between different approaches or aspects of spirituality, because human spirituality is but one, but it can be fostered, it can be cultivated in many different ways, from many different points of view, steeped in wisdom, be it lay or religious. I have quite a long experience in my university with an interreligious dialogue group, not religious, interreligious dialogue, but dialogue on different religions. We decided to get together with different religious leaders in order to set aside a full morning every month to exchange, to chat. And we call ourselves the Interreligious Group for Dialogue. We all acknowledge the amazing mutual learning we have been able to acquire through this manner. And a great many of members of this group have spoken out, saying that from these monthly times set aside for sharing, they've been able to strengthen their spiritual humanity. Personally, I've said and felt I became more Catholic. A Lutheran said I became more Lutheran. I'm all spoke up and confirmed that dialoguing strengthened their own identity, which I personally find amazingly noteworthy, because it means that to enter into dialogue awakens us to our own dignity. We are awakened to our own dignity when we freely enter into dialogue with each other. I have a deep felt admiration for Pope Francis and for the path he took throughout life, the ability to lead on the world level a series of situations. The picture of a polyedric structure is amazing and highly inspirational. In the observatory that I lead in Brasilia, we develop our best effort into trying to draw up, from an operational point of view, a social environmental justice paradigm that brings us to work with three different axes, three different dimensions. As I said earlier, human dignity, struggling against inequality, and caring for creation. And on a cross-cutting basis, we can, out of these three vectors, bring them together in producing knowledge, in having direct incidence in different groups, and first and foremost, on our daily lives. I see therein an amazing, albeit streamlined, polyedric structure, because a great many entries are possible through this triple cross-cutting nature. We have to look for ways of bringing us together to each other in looking for the soul of humankind getting ever closer to dignity. Only a few days ago, during a sociology class, I was inspired to show the look on people's faces, people who were suffering, who were cast aside in different walks of life. And that had a tremendous impact on my class. And the ensuing thoughts that were voiced were indeed wondrous. What we must strive for is to get back to human dignity. Thank you very much. We thus draw to the end.
Thank you. So we now finish this panel and we invite you to continue in the symposium.